Are you like me? You love do-it-yourself projects, but you're just not handy? On today's episode of DB Homes for Hope, you're gonna meet my favorite contractor, Mr. Danny Baer, and he's gonna help you and me finish our home renovation project. Stay tuned.
I'm in my new era. I'm better in my new era. I'm better in my new.
Now that a person has their home, they've done everything they need to get their credit score up to 650 and above, they've reduced their debt to 43% and below, and they have 3 months of expenses saved, they have the keys to their house. Every homeowner needs a good general contractor. Why is that?
Well, I think it's important to work with people that understand what you're facing, what you're going to have to deal with in a new home. Even a brand new home can have problems right out the gate. Everybody wants to think brand new means no problems, but it's not really the truth. Cars, houses, everything can have challenges right from the start.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what experience would a person be looking for in a contractor? How long they've been in business? What are some things a homeowner needs to know?
Well, certainly if they're licensed and insured are important pieces of the puzzle. If you know people that have had them do work for them before, to talk to those people about how that went. And even if you can go and see properties that they've worked on before, that's a great thing to do sometimes.
Yes, for sure. So what I hope you guys heard is that do not get a person who is unlicensed. We call them in my neighborhood a jackleg. The person who's handy, but they maybe haven't pulled permits and things like that. Why would that be a problem for a homeowner?
Well, I mean, license is because you've taken tests and you've done work that's been reviewed. And I want to give a little credit to handymen. I think there is a place for people to do smaller types of tasks and to help with cost and expeditious service. But when you're getting into bigger projects, you wouldn't try to build your own car. You usually buy a car.
Yes.
So it's probably not always a great idea to try to build your own house unless you have some experience in that area.
If you're building a house or you're renovating the house, clearly we know the difference, but what are some of the challenges they may face? Because most of my clients are first-time homeowners.
Well, I think one of the common things is that people feel they need to get a professional on board right away, and really one of the first tasks you need to do is just think about what it is you need, what you can afford, how big it needs to be, how many people is it for, what kind of layout you like. Do you want bedrooms on the first floor, bedrooms upstairs? Because that can affect the size lot that you're going to want to buy. And so a lot of times people want to immediately go out and start talking to architects or engineers or looking at house plans, but it's better to get some idea of what you're trying to accomplish before you go searching, because the answer is there are endless options.
So it's okay for our viewers to dream about their house. I mean, as a little girl, maybe we dreamed of how the Barbie house would be our house when we got older. The 2-bedroom, 3 bedrooms, how many bathrooms. Everybody has their own bedroom. But we know in Luke 14:28-30, the Bible says, emphasize the importance of counting the costs before undertaking a major project. And a house is a major project.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of the things that happens a lot in our time is everybody loves HGTV and gets excited and thinks they can pull off the project themselves. And you see these magnificent projects where people buy a $500,000 house and spend $100,000 and make $200,000. And there's just so many things about those kind of shows that aren't realistic. I mean, the amount of support they get from other retailers that are helping them, to stage and to buy materials. Just a lot of pieces to that puzzle that aren't realistic for most people's budget and location. So I think it's a great idea to dream, but you're trying to extract ideas more than to think that you can perform the same function at the same level.
So helping people get from dreaming to their reality. So maybe the scope of the work, how long it's going to take, and also how much it's going to cost. Because while we can do sweat equity and effort, sometimes the resources, it may take longer and it may cost more than sometimes a homeowner may know.
One thing I can promise you, it's always harder than you thought it would be. It'll usually take a little longer. It's not a promise, but it's likelihood that exists, especially it depends on what kind of project you're working on. New construction tends to be pretty forward motion. If you're rehabbing old properties, it's forward, backward a little bit, forward, backward a little bit, sometimes forward a little bit and backward a whole lot. You get into foundations and just things you couldn't see when you were buying the property, but as you get into it, you're discover those things during the demolition process. And so, the type of project you're taking on, you should be somewhat commensurate with your own experience or someone that's helping you. I see a lot of times people flipping homes, it's easy to paint something and make it look beautiful, but what we really like to do and what we prefer to do is to give people a home that's ready for the run, that they're buying something that they're not going to have to spend a lot of money in for the foreseeable future.
So then what's the difference between what you are doing for our clients and what the home inspector has done? Because they get a home inspection. How would that differ?
A home inspector is hired to help protect the interest of the bank, to make sure that the asset that is being purchased would cover the loss if the bank had to repo it, frankly. But it also, as part of that service, the home inspector provides some notes about things that could need to be done to the property. The buyer may find that it's outside their scope. They feel they can't deal with it, or they can't come to terms with the seller on how to take care of those issues. And so home inspector plays an important role in the purchasing process, but a home inspector is not a licensed contractor and when it comes to actual hands-on work on a property. And so they're not able to move a couch to look at an outlet that's behind the couch or move a rug. They're certainly not able to dig or cut a wall open because they can see a leak, but they can't discover why the leak exists all the time. And so a contractor is able, with permission of the person, the homeowner, to help delve into what's causing the problem and how to fix it.
So what I think I heard you say is the home inspector will highlight if there's any major concerns that maybe the bank and the homeowner may not want to proceed, and the general contractor is the behind the scenes person to fix or to repair things. Okay, that makes sense. Tell me a little bit about your experience, because you've kind of spoiled me. I'm accustomed to getting things within 90 days.
Well, we try. We try to be your toughest customer by a long shot.
For sure.
But we try. But my whole life, because of my father's profession, in ministry, and we did a lot of rehab and church construction, and so my whole life I've been around construction. I've been shoveling gravel and carrying block most of my life. So as an adult, I just came to a point in time where I built a home for my family, and from there continued on with construction, and enjoyed doing it, enjoy helping people. I like to see people get a lot of value for what they're spending. I tend to personally prefer function over fashion. So, we build beautiful homes, but we don't put a lot of extra dormers or make, different roof lines, and we try to get that money put into the square footage and the livability of the interior of the house.
I just want to brag on you for a little bit, but so you and your brother, Bear Brothers, you recently finished a house, and how long did it take you to sell this house?
We listed it and had someone look at it about 3 hours later, made a contract offer about 2 hours after that, and we ratified the contract within 24 hours.
Yes, that is very impressive. I understand that you have a list of people waiting for you to, actually now people are looking at your homes before they're finished. They want to come see the house, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying this just because he's my favorite contractor, but because, you're respected in the city with other contractors, respected with municipalities, because they know that you do quality work. And when things are outside of your scope as well. Talk a little bit about that, because sometimes I am not handy. I don't even hang pictures, and you've stopped that completely. But sometimes we do try to do, or homeowners, because we try to save money, we try to do things on our own sometimes, but normally we end up calling a person like you. That's how we met. I needed a ceiling fan. Talk a little to the audience about when to know when it's outside of your scope.
Well, I think, the first way you can tell if it's outside of your scope is you find yourself asking yourself a lot of questions that you don't know the answer to.
Right.
That's usually a pretty good sign, and a house is no place to just override those feelings and say, I bet I'll give it my best shot.
So you don't like my YouTube University technique?
Well, it's an interesting approach. It keeps me well employed on my end.
For sure.
I think, to talk to people that, are in the industry that have not knowledge background. I have a lot of people that just stop by jobs we're working on because they're interested in the job and they're thinking about doing it. Had someone stop today that asked me, you know, if he could have the plan of the house that I was standing in, and I said, well, I'll be happy to give it to you as soon as I finish it.
Right.
Now, we're building this house. It's just going under a roof. We're in the framing process, but I tend to tweak things because I do a lot of the drawings on the homes that we build. So I said, as soon as I finish getting this one framed and I draw it out, I'll be glad to send you a copy of it. But, you know, to ask questions is a wonderful thing to do. You know, you don't always have to use the information, but you'll gain a lot of information you can use.
So are you an architect? I just heard you say you draw plans.
Not an architect, but I've been in a lot of houses and just seen things that work for people. Again, I try to maximize functionality. So I like open spaces, fewer walls, and simplistic design that people can decorate with paint colors and pictures and, you know, personal memorabilia and furniture to make it comfortable in their own way, just to give them the square footage, because you have to pay for everything that's done to a house. So, you know, the fancier we try to make it in terms of curb appeal, the less I can offer you on the interior. I mean, I've got to squeeze the square footage to put more dormers on the roof, and the dormers are pretty, but they're not functional.
Right. And most of our clients, they have families. So we want to make sure that there's room for everybody. You have this idea that you renovate older neighborhoods. So you bring community development into your thought pattern. I mean, yes, we're selling houses, you're building houses, but you're thinking about the community in that. Talk to our audience a little bit about that. How does that work?
Well, I mean, you know, this is something that we've done together. So while we're working on houses in older communities, trying to build quality homes that look nice, you know, we go along the streets and clean up the trash within a few blocks.
It's almost like a gimmick because neighbors will come out and see, clearly I'm not from the neighborhood, but they'll ask, you're picking up our trash? And I say yes, and then they start to do it. Like, that's building community because people take ownership of these things.
I think that anybody that's helping to rehab old houses and bring them back to life is helping the community a lot. One of the things that I feel is important is to make connections in the community, because we say we want to help the community at large and not just by the houses. And so building relationships with people, usually the first day I'm on a new property, I'm meeting the neighbor that lives next door or across the street, become friends with some of those people until we're checking on each other long after the house is done. You know, I'll go by and stop and sit on the porch and talk a few minutes. But some of what we do during the time we're working on the house is to help clean up trash within a few streets of the house, so that the whole general neighborhood is beginning to kind of feel a sense of urgency in a light sort of manner to make things nicer. And the effect we see is that the neighborhood tends to start staying a little cleaner and nicer in the process, and we like that. And it feels good to make people feel important, especially as they're becoming our friends.
We're moving from friends to family because we are neighbors. I'll just tell you a quick story. One time you were renovating a house, and so I came up, but I guess the neighbor had met you and hadn't met me, and he called you as if I were an imposter. Like, so that you were very effective.
I still can't figure out why people would think that we're not together, you know.
Oh my goodness. So you can see why Mr. Bear is my favorite contractor. He's full of humor, he looks like Santa Claus, and it's a win-win for a situation for me, right? So who are some other people on the team? Because are you a plumber? Are you an HVAC guy? Like, who are some other people that are on your team as a contractor?
It's definitely good to build relationships with tradespeople. I
Right.
mean, everybody that says they can do something, a lot of people interpret that as meaning that because I have two hands, I can do what other people can do. And that's not really the question. The question is, you know, have you done it, and have you done it well? Can you complete this in a way that I don't have to revisit this issue for a long period of time? And so building relationships with subcontractors, particularly when it comes to plumbing and electrical and heat and air, these are trades that have a lot of code and a lot of rules that are consistently being implemented over time. And so even as a general contractor, it's hard for me to keep up with trade-related rules and changes in code. I have to really rely on subcontractors, even though I do this all the time. So that would be more true for someone that's just working on a house of their own every once in a while.
So that leads me to the question of permits and inspections. Because if you're renovating a house or if you're building a house for sure, I'm sure there are some things that the county, city, whomever, municipalities, they want to make sure that the things are going well.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people feel threatened to have to get permits, and obviously, especially if you're finishing an unfinished area or adding on to the house, there's this part where you're going to have to pay a little more taxes because you finish some more space. But ultimately, the purpose of it is to make sure that you have a product that's worthy. And that's going to last you and do well. You don't want people using things that aren't qualified in the process. And so I think it's important to remember what I was going to say now.
So it helps with safety. Permits help with safety as well, don't they? Because like if I do something that I don't have a permit to do, and then, a fire happens.
A lot of people feel threatened by inspectors and code and inspections. Even as a general contractor, I don't see a failed inspection happening occasionally as a negative on me. The code is a pretty big book, and there's a lot of rules in it, and then there's even more rules for individual trades, electric, plumbing, HVAC, and other things. And so it's a lot to have to interpret, and the code officials or inspectors, most people would call them, their job is to apply the code. And so there's some interpretation of it. So there can be a difference of an opinion between the contractor and inspector. I like to think of that as a validation, as a second opinion that helps support what I'm doing. And so, they're good conversations to have, and usually it's better to think of them as an ally in the process, someone to not check everything. That's not their responsibility. It's not the code official's responsibility to check everything your plumber did. It is their responsibility to check a certain number of things and be sure that plumber is a licensed plumber that has insurance that's going to back their plumbing if you run into issues at some point. But I think to think of people as friends as much as you can in the process, whether it's the buyer or subcontractors or the inspectors or the officials, in the city or the county, to think of people as friends.
So I like the team concept. I like athletics. I like the team concept where many people, many wise counselors put the whole thing together. So far I've heard we have the general contractor, the home inspector, the seller, the buyer, the inspector for the city, that's where we get the permits and things like that. But let's talk a little bit about some hidden value that homeowners can look into as they're looking at their houses. Like maybe there's a bonus room. It's technically not a bedroom, but it could add value to your house, or like a convertible garage that you can make another room. Talk to me about some of the hidden value that people can see in their home.
Well, there are parts of a structure that are structural, and they have to stay where they are or be modified in such a way that they maintain the integrity of holding up the house, keeping the roof where it belongs. But inside of that, there's a lot of opportunity to re-envision and reimagine the space. And so that's something that we do a lot of, just assessing it to say, how can we make this? I like to think of it as doing modern convenience inside, still maintaining some of the older feeling of the exterior in the neighborhoods that we mostly do work in, because most of the homes in those areas are 100 years old or more. And so I don't try to build a house that looks 100 years old, but I want it to complement the neighborhood, not to just stick out as an individual product on its own.
Right, yes, and you do a delightful job doing that.
Well, thank you.
I might be a little biased, but I know for sure that you've kept some of the stairwells. You've kept things that are complementary to the old house, but still made a modern look, because the bedroom sizes are normally quite generous.
Yes, stairwells, we definitely try to keep steps in old homes if we can. Most of the time they have a little bit of a slant to them, but it's a character of an old home. It's kind of funny, it wasn't too long ago we sold a home, and I met the purchasers after they had moved in, and we met on the street outside the house when I was going by, and I told them who it was, and they said, "Oh, we love the house." And the wife said, "Actually, one of my favorite things is that little bit of a tilt in the living room floor, because it just reminds me of the character of the old house, and that it's lived in, and that it's been a home a long time." And so, people can enjoy kind of some interesting things sometimes.
Same thing with fireplaces. They're not normally functioning fireplaces, but it's an old piece of the house. That's the character that people people like the most. So viewers, I want you to know I like old houses and old men. So
Well, I'm not that old.
Older than
Not as
me.
old as the houses.
Good point. You're not 1913 old. But we were talking about some of the other revenue potential things that people can do to their homes, because in last episode we talked to Ron, who was the first house that you renovated in Lynchburg. And that house was less than $10,000. And it's like a staple in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think there's some great opportunities that can be considered in terms of, house hack is what a lot of people refer to it. You're renting a room, renting a part of the house. Some people, could even rent a garage that they don't use or something like that. For me personally, I think something very important for people to think about is if they don't like that idea, have they bought a house they can still afford? And so buy a house you can afford and then house hack if you can. But don't buy a house you can't afford because you think you're going to house hack.
Good point. And so viewers, in closing, and Mr. Bayer, which is what I call him all the time. I know he's my husband. I call him Mr. Bayer.
Not because it's required.
It's just endearment. I appreciate your time because I know you're busy. It's spring season. You have some current projects that you're going that you just started and you're already under roof. Talk to us about that.
That's right. Yep. We're doing several new construction properties while we're rehabbing some older homes still, and so those are going very well. We're excited about that.
So it sounds like you specialize in renovations. You specialize with renovation of older homes, but you also build from the ground up, because the two houses that you're building now, it was just land.
Right. Yeah, we definitely can bring it from the ground up. One of the joys of this season of my life is that we've gotten to the point that we're mostly working on our own projects, and I personally enjoy that in a special way, but I do from time to time help neighbors or friends to assess things they need to do to their homes and how to best go about that.
Thank you for watching episode 2 of DB Homes for Hope. Mr. Daniel Baer, my favorite contractor, he told us how to make our do-it-yourself projects a reality. Make sure you subscribe and push that like button, and we'll be back with episode 3. See you then.